Alright, we're going to talk about creating depth in a two-dimensional image. It's a drawing or a painting, something that actually has no real depth, but to create the illusion of depth. We're going to talk about 6 ways. There are more than this, but these are the 6 most basic beginning ways that we can try to look at depth, to create depth, and when we're looking at art, to see how they are creating depth. So, let's just get started. The first method is by overlapping objects. So here you see we have a circle and a square, and you can tell that it's hard to tell which one is closer to the viewer. You might think the square is a little bit brighter in color. That might make it appear closer. The circle is a little bit warmer in color. That might make it appear closer. But we're not really going to talk about color and depth quite yet. But if I overlap them, like so, then you can really tell that the circle is definitely in front of the square, right? So let's take a look at a couple of examples of overlap. Here you can see definitely how it's used in both photography and art to show objects that are clearly in front of each other and objects that are clearly behind others. The next set is size here. So size just means that if something looks farther away, it appears smaller. So here, these two circles appear the same distance away, but if I make one of them smaller, then the smaller one appears farther away. Now this would only work with objects of similar size, that exist in similar size in real life. So if you're using two spheres, excuse me, of similar size, then they'll look smaller. But if you take things that are normally a big difference in size, like say one image is of a house and another image is of a bread box, with that, even if you make the bread box small and in front of the house is so much bigger than the bread box that it's going to be hard to tell distance with size. This really only works with objects of similar size. So here's some examples of the way size is used. You can see things that are the spheres that are smaller in the background. They feel like they're farther away. The next one we're going to talk about is clarity. Clarity goes by several different names. Sometimes it's called atmospheric perspective. Sometimes it's called depth of field. But in general, the idea is that when something gets farther away, it becomes less clear. That could mean it's more blurry. It could mean it's more fuzzy compared to the background color. So here, these two circles appear the same distance, but if I make one darker, a little bit of a fuzzier edge, it starts to appear farther away. So let's look at a couple of examples there. So here's clarity, and we see here 2 examples where as the pair gets farther and farther away, it becomes less and less clear, it gets darker and darker. And on the mountains, or the cliffs here at the ocean, they get lighter and lighter as they get closer to the background, or to the rear of the picture. But also notice that it's not about getting lighter and lighter or darker and darker. The pairs actually get darker and darker. The cliffs get lighter and lighter. It's all about becoming less clear and more like your background color. Position is another thing that really shows depth, and it's one that a lot of people don't think of. And that's this idea that we typically look down on things, especially in landscapes. We typically don't look up at a landscape unless it's clouds. But most objects we see in landscapes are looking from the top down. Therefore, objects that are on the bottom appear closer, and objects on the top appear farther. So here are some examples. Here you see 3 cars. The one on the bottom is definitely closer, the one on top definitely farther away. Definitely it's apparent in these rolling hills. The hills on the bottom are closer, the hills on the top are farther away. Even if one on top is actually bigger in size, it will definitely think that it's farther away because it's higher up in the picture. Linear perspective. This is a very basic view of linear perspective. You can really go deep into how to do linear perspective. But the basic idea is that if you have objects that all line up and point towards a single vanishing point, or a single point, then they appear to get smaller and smaller in the distance. So here's the example. If we draw some lines of perspective and a vanishing point, and we make those rectangles follow those lines, then those rectangles will appear to get smaller and smaller and smaller into the distance. It's not just about them getting smaller, but it's about them lining up along these perspective lines. So let's take a look at some pictures that use this idea. Here's some railroad tracks. Disappear off into a tunnel behind the vanishing point. Again, here's another rows of buildings, rows of telephone poles, railroad tracks, all moving back and disappearing at a single vanishing point. And here is a perspective design done by a student, and these lines make the name really pop out and look like it goes all the way back almost an infinite distance. So a very, very basic concept of how to use perspectives if you're writing your name, like for a name tag or for your portfolio or whatever it is that you want to put going back in perspective. If you want to do lettering, this is a very, very basic way, and that is just to move the letters onto the perspective lines. So each letter gets slightly smaller and smaller and smaller. Then you could remove the vanishing point, and the letters would look like they're moving off into the distance. The next one we're talking about is shadows. So here we're going to show you a circle. This circle looks flat, like a flat disc, but if we add shading and shadows, it will appear three-dimensional. So here we've got a highlight on it, we've got a shadow side on it, and it really makes that circle look like a sphere just by adding some bright spots and some dark spots, right? And I can make it look even more like a shadow or even more like a three-dimensional object by adding a cast shadow. The cast shadow really pushes the sphere off of the background, makes it look like it's resting on top of something, and really gives it a full three-dimensional shape. So here we have our 6 ways to create depth. And I'd like you to do a project where you show all 6 ways, and including overlap, size, clarity, position, linear perspective, and shadows. Now when you're creating your project and I want you to put letters on this project, there's one important thing to remember when you're doing letters in perspective, trying to show depth, and that is that letters cannot be drawn with just single lines like this. The problem with a letter with just a single line is that lines don't really, unless they're really thick, fat lines, don't really have the ability to show much depth. And I'll show you what I mean. If I overlap this with another letter, here's another T, you'll see that it's really impossible to tell which one is in front, right? Is it the one on the right in front, the one on the bottom in front, the top in front? Which one is it? You can't tell if you're just drawing with lines. In contrast, if I give a letter with some thickness to it, I can add another letter with thickness, and then it becomes absolutely clear which letter is in front, which is the blue one.
Alright, so that brings us to learning about the final requirements for this as a project. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to create 6 ways of creating depth using size, overlap, position, clarity, perspective, and shadows. Your letters that you use in your project for your name are going to need to use thickness so that they will allow them to show depth. You don't necessarily have to make them three-dimensional perspective letters, but they should have at least some amount of thickness so they carry some weight. I'd like you to cover up all the space, so there should be no part of your digital canvas that you just left blank. I want you to really consider how to use all of your space. Then I also want you to use digital tools. So you're going to use the digital drawing app of your choice. My personal choice is Procreate on the iPad, or the second free choice would be Autodesk Sketchbook, which is probably the best free program that's universal across all the platforms. And but other than that, you can really use any project or any software that you like. And the last thing, just be creative, right? Be unique. Try to come up with the best original ideas that you can, and really have fun with the project and create something that you really are going to enjoy looking at later. Okay, everyone, I really hope you have fun with this project, so go take it on. Good luck.